Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
You may proceed.
Good morning.
Good morning.
And please state your full name.
Daniel A. Goldstein.
And you're a medical doctor.
I am.
I will refer to you then as Dr. Goldstein.
Thank you.
Okay. And you work for the Monsanto Company.
I do.
And how long have you worked for the Monsanto Company?
It will be 20 years in May.
Part of your job responsibility at Monsanto is to deal with complaints and consumer safety. Is that fair?
I would narrow that somewhat. Being a physician, I'm more focused on concerns or complaints related to human health.
You're also a toxicologist.
Yes, an MD toxicologist or clinical toxicologist, that is correct.
All right, and so you review complaints of human health that would come to Monsanto from people that perceive, rightfully or wrongfully, that the product of Monsanto has caused them an ill effect. Is that a fair statement?
I would review some of them. I may not see all of them.
I understand. And how long have you, generally speaking, been performing that job function at Monsanto?
The entire time that I've been with the company.
Okay. And it's a full-time position at Monsanto?
It is.
And before we look at them, you and I can agree that before a company sells a product, it has to do some reasonable attempt to determine whether that product causes cancer. Isn't that fair?
I don't think I can state that as a generalization. It depends on the nature of the product and its intended use.
Have you ever told anyone that called or reached out to Monsanto that there was an association reported in the scientific literature between glyphosate and any form of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma?
Yes, I have.
And when did you start doing that?
I began to do that after the Iarc decision, which would have been in, I guess, early 2015 or late 2014.
March 2015, I don't mean to interrupt, but...
Yeah. So after the Iarc decision, that is the first ever report of such an allegation that was determined by an agency. I won't call it a regulatory agency. It isn't a regulatory agency, but that report certainly prompted some concerns, and a number of people called, and we discussed that report.
And you had said to your other colleagues that you expected Iarc to either classify glyphosate as a possible human carcinogen, or if things are really bad, a probable human carcinogen. Do you remember having that general conversation?
I stated in a number of places and in conversations that that was my expectation. However, that conclusion is not supported by the science.
Have you seen this before, sir?
Yes, I have.
One of your jobs at Monsanto is to manage the punitive damage liability arising from all this, right, Dr. Goldstein?
My role is strictly in a medical capacity. I don't manage liability.
All right, this Exhibit 7 is an email sent by you in 2004, June, right, sir?
Yes, that is correct.
And it's about Roundup, right, sir?
Yes.
And you state here in part, quote, some people seem to take offense at the ideal of helping us manage our punitive damage liability. Let me read the whole thing. This is what you said in June of 2004. Quote, some people seem to take offense at the idea of helping us manage our punitive damage liability, often without realizing that, quote, doing the right thing and, quote, managing liability are oftentimes one and the same. Did I read that correctly, sir?
You did?
And so it would be fair to say that managing punitive damages is one of your job titles, right, sir?
No, that's not correct. This was a part of a discussion between myself and someone at the College of Medical Toxicology regarding transmission of information and the reasons for transmitting that information. It has nothing to do with my specific job role at all.
Well, and that was in 2004, right?
Yes.
Okay. One of your jobs, Dr. Goldstein, was to play whack-a-mole with problems that came up in Roundup, right?
Playing whack-a-mole is not part of the job description. I think it's something that we use as jargon internally. Issues pop up, and we're called upon to deal with them.
Okay, and issues would pop up concerning Roundup, right? And you play whack-a-mole with those issues, right?
Issues would come up, and we would endeavor to address them.
Let's take a look at Exhibit 10, an email sent by you and others at Monsanto. I have a copy for you in council.
Thank you.
All right, sir, let's look at the first page. This is a email from you, March 3, 2010, Daniel Goldstein, right, sir?
Yes.
And it's sent to Eric Sachs and Donna Farmer, 2 other employees at Monsanto, right?
Yes.
And subject matter is another mole needing a whacking, right?
That is correct. Yes.
Did you write this email, Dr. Goldstein?
I wrote the second email down. I did not create that title. That title or subject line actually came externally from Dr. Bruce Chassie.
Let's read the part that you created. 2 comments. 1, funny you should say that. Donna Farmer, glyphosate tox, and I have been playing, what, sir?
Whack-a-mole?
For years, right?
Yes.
And calling it just that. We were joking about it yesterday. Did I read that correctly?
That's correct. It's humor.
You knew, sir, in 2015 that Monsanto has very limited credibility when talking about the safety of glyphosate. True?
Like any manufacturer, we have some limitations on our credibility when we are speaking as Monsanto publicly.
Exhibit 11, and there's an attachment there we're going to mark as 12. This is an email from John Aquavella. You know him, right?
Yes, I do.
Who's John Aquavella?
John Aquavella is an epidemiologist who at that time would have been employed at Monsanto.
And one of his jobs was to review any scientific articles that came out on the issue of glyphosate and its potential associations with any condition. Fair?
Yes, I think that's fair.
And so in this May 2000 email, John Aquavella is writing an email, and its subject is non-Hodgkin's lymphoma abstract, isn't it, sir?
Yes.
At the meeting where Dr. McDuff presented her findings in abstract form.
Correct.
This scientist, Dr. McDuff, together with 6 authors at a scientific meeting on August 21, 2000, for the date of the document, looks at non-Hodgkin's lymphoma and certain agriculture exposures. And in B, states, and let me read it, quote, more than 2 days per year of exposure to glyphosate resulted in an OR, and I'm asking you now, sir, what is an OR?
That would refer to an odds ratio in this context.
Yes, sir, of 2.11. Is that right, sir?
That is what the document says. Odds ratio 2.11.
Yes, sir. And with a statistically significant confidence interval, right?
Yes.
Okay. Well, let me show you a memo prepared by John Aquavella and sent to you on August 24th, 2000, year 2000, several days after our last exhibit, discussing this study, and ask you a few questions about it, okay? Marked as Exhibit 13. Copy for you, sir, and a copy for counsel. There you go. Now, this document is marked Monsanto Private. See that, sir?
Yes.
And it's from John Aquavella, who you told us was an epidemiologist employed at the time by Monsanto, right?
Yes.
And it was sent to you, among others, right? You and Donna Farmer both received this, it looks like.
That is correct.
Yes, sir. It says in paragraph 1 that, quote, non-Hodgkins lymphoma and the pesticide hypothesis, dose response, end quote, by Helen McDuffie. You see that? And others?
Yes.
All right.
I
So,
do.
and what John Aquavilla goes on to say about this in the year 2000, if you'd please turn with me to the next page. He tells us additional analysis found a significant relationship for more than 2 days use/year for glyphosate. And he lists the odds ratio that we discussed in the last document. Do you see that, sir?
Yes, I do.
And John Aquavilla actually had a chance to speak to the author, Dr. McDuffie, and he reports on that. He tells us, quote, I had the opportunity to spend some time with the author. She struck me as a reasonable person. So at least John Aquavilla thought that this scientist who reported this paper was a reasonable person.
I have no idea what he meant to imply by using that term.
Well, one thing he expressly states is she doesn't seem to have any preconceived notions about glyphosate, right?
Yes.
So by the time the article comes out, the full article for McDuff in November 2001, you and Donna Farmer were very happy that if someone searched that article, they couldn't find glyphosate in the abstract. Did you remember that?
I remember that there was some conversation of that nature.
Let's take a look at it. Exhibit 12. No, I'm sorry. We're going to mark this as Exhibit 14. Excuse me. Exhibit 14. All right. This is a series of emails produced by Monsanto. We're going to ask you a few questions about. Copy for you and counsel. So this is on November 29, 2001.
Yes.
From Donna Farmer to John Aquavilla and you and others, right?
Yes.
And it's about the McDuffie article.
Correct.
And the subject is glyphosate not mentioned in the abstract. It's still in the article, but it's not in the abstract, right?
Now, let me look at the document for a moment, if I could.
Yes, sir.
The formatting's a bit odd, so it's difficult to read. Okay, sorry.
What Donna Farmer was writing to you and others about it, Monsanto, was, I know we don't know yet what it says in the small print, but the fact that glyphosate is no longer mentioned in the abstract is a huge step forward. It removes it from being picked up by abstract searches, exclamation point. See that?
Yes, I do.
So she was happy that people wouldn't be able to find the findings about glyphosate in an abstract search. That's what that says.
I can't tell you what was in her mind at the time. I neither wrote it nor agreed with it in the correspondence, but that is what the document says.
Well, that was on November 29th. 8 days later, you were copied on another email from another Monsanto employee discussing the same issue and happy that it wasn't in the abstract any longer. Do you remember that?
I don't recall that without seeing the document.
Sure, understandable. Here's Exhibit 15. 6 days later, email chain from Donna Farmer to you and others. And there's, we're going to talk about the bottom here, William Hayden. So this is an email chain, and the one I want to ask about is from William Hayden's to you and John Aquavilla on December 6, 2001 about the same issue, the McDuffie paper. See that, sir?
Yes.
So, and who's Bill Hayden or William Hayden?
Bill Hayden's is a regulatory toxicologist.
Employed by Monsanto.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah. And so he writes, John, so if I understand the situation correctly, even though the reference to glyphosate wasn't removed entirely, there was a substantial reduction in emphasis, including but not limited to removal from the abstract. Did I read that correctly?
You did.
Why was it such a big deal to make it so people couldn't search abstracts and find the association between glyphosate and non-Hodgkin's lymphoma?
Honestly, I don't know what the writers were thinking at the time. What matters to me is the data. And so I don't know what the individuals who were making those statements at the time were trying to imply.
In 2003, more independent, scientifically published data came out showing the association between glyphosate and non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. True?
I don't remember the exact dates of the various publications. If you have a document that would refresh my memory, it would be helpful.
I do. Let's look at Exhibit 16, an email from John Aquavella to you and others in 2003.
Yes.
So let's take a look at this email. This is again from the epidemiologist at Monsanto, John Aquavella, right?
Correct.
And it's in September 2003.
Yes.
And it's sent to you, Donna Farmer, and others at Monsanto, right, sir?
That's correct.
And it's regarding an article that is regarding non-Hodgkin's lymphoma and glyphosate and some other chemical, right?
That is correct.
All right, so. And it states that it's about the DeRusse paper, which is, we'll call that 2003 DeRusse, okay?
Yes.
Okay. And it says in pertinent part that this is a paper from investigators at the National Cancer Institute, right?
Correct.
And what John Aquavella, the epidemiologist at Monsanto, tells us here is that, strangely, glyphosate looks to be one of the pesticides most associated with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma in this analysis. Did I read that correctly?
You did, and then he goes on to explain the reasons why he finds that to be unusual.
He also states that this is going to add more fuel to the fire for Hardell. Who is Hardell?
Hardell is a scientist who had previously published on the topic of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma and glyphosate.
And Hardell had found a association in his study between glyphosate and non-Hodgkin's lymphoma.
It was reported in that study. Without looking at the study, I don't remember the statistical significance.
John Aquavella, Monsanto's epidemiologist, closes with, it looks like non-Hodgkin's lymphoma and other lymphopoietic cancers continue to be the main cancer epidemiology issues for both glyphosate and the other drug, right?
The other herbicide.
Yes, another herbicide. We're assembling a panel of experts to work on this. Did I read that correct?
Yeah, yes, you did.
I'm no scientist, but one way a chemical can cause a cancer is by damaging the DNA of a cell. Is that a fair understanding that us lay people should have?
That is one mechanism by which a chemical could contribute to risk of cancer.
Yes, sir. And by 2007, you knew it was old news that glyphosate damaged the DNA of cells, right, sir?
No, that would be counter to all of the regulatory determinations that I'm familiar with. There certainly is an extensive body of genotoxicity data, but my belief is that the weight of the evidence supports non-genotoxic effect.
Let's take a look at an email chain from 2007 between you and others at Monsanto on this issue. It's a copy for you and counsel. So, you've seen this before, right, sir?
Yes, I have.
Let's look at the article that you and Monsanto employees are discussing, which is the second page of Exhibit 17. And what it tells us is that aerial spraying of herbicide damages DNA. That's the title anyway, right?
Yes.
And what this reports is, quote, aerial spraying of a herbicide by the Colombian government on the border of Colombia and Ecuador has caused a high degree of DNA damage in local Ecuadorian people, according to the study, right?
So this is not a study. This is a newspaper article regarding the underlying study.
That's fair, and thank you for that clarification. Yes, it's called the MENA study, right, or MENO study. And I can highlight that. DNA damage may activate genes associated to the development of cancer. Lead researcher Cesar Paziamino told ScienceDevelopment.net.
Well, you had stated that it's called the MENO study. I don't know that that is the correct first citation for this. I'm not sure which of several studies it actually is making reference to.
All right, so in any event, you commented on the study in the email chain that is Exhibit 17. I just want to ask you a few questions about that, sir. You state, actually, Eric Sachs. Now, who is Eric Sachs?
Eric Sachs, in 2007, well, he would have been an individual in our scientific outreach group, I believe, at that point in time.
And what he's telling other employees is, as he copies you and Donna Farmer, Darren and Andy, these other employees, he says, quote, please engage Donna and Dan as this is an old issue, and they have extensive experience and information on this topic. All right?
Yes.
You'd been dealing with this issue for a while. Fair?
It had certainly come up before, yes.
So I want to talk to you now about the new Hardell paper in 2008 on these issues and ask you about some emails that you sent and received on the issue, if I can. I have copies for you. I'll mark them as Exhibit 18. Is there an attachment? Oh, the actual article. We're going to mark that as 19. All right. So here are copies of 18 and 19, the article that those emails are referencing. All right, sir. Here we are in 2008, and Andy Hedgecock, that's an employee at Monsanto, right?
Yes.
Is emailing you and others about the new Hardell paper, right?
He's actually emailing us about a variety of articles and scientific literature that had come out the preceding week. Among them is this particular paper.
Sure. He attached the new Hardell paper. He attached something about the Chicago Tribune raising a global stink, issues management, Argentina, and other issues, right?
That's correct.
And the importance was high, right?
That's what he indicated, yes.
Okay. If it was you and Donna Farm in the room, it would be, we're playing whack-a-mole again, aren't we?
No, I wouldn't characterize this type of response to epidemiological literature that way, but we do make an effort to respond to issues and literature which arises.
And this article by Hardell that you're responding to and looking at was published in a peer-reviewed journal called the International Journal of Cancer, right?
Yes.
And it was by 4 independent scientists. That is, they do not work at Monsanto, right?
Correct. They don't work at Monsanto.
Okay, and in this peer-reviewed article entitled, quote, Pesticide Exposure as Risk Factor for Non-Hodgkin's Lymphoma, including Histopathological Subgroup Analysis. You're a doctor. What does histopathological subgroup analysis mean?
They're looking at different types of non-Hodgkin's
I
lymphoma.
see. Thank you. All right. And so what these independent scientists in this peer-reviewed journal tell us, if we could please turn to debate stamp 92792. In their peer-reviewed study of 2008, they tell us that with glyphosate, if you use it less than 10 days, you have an increased risk, but it's not statistically significant, is it?
No.
However, if you use glyphosate greater than 10 days per year, it is statistically significant, right?
Yes.
What these independent scientists concluded from their peer-reviewed study in 2008, if you turn with me to page 99, please. Furthermore, our earlier indication of an association between glyphosate and non-Hodgkin's lymphoma has been considerably strengthened. Did I read that correctly?
That is what they concluded. I would say that are weak, but that is their conclusion.
The scientists at Iarc, when they spent a week plus together evaluating the science of glyphosate and non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, looked at scientific public papers. You understand that, right?
Yes.
And this Hardell paper was one of the papers that they looked at.
Yes, that's correct.
You know what the Shinazi meta-analysis is?
Yes.
Okay. And it would be fair to say that the Shinazi meta-analysis, well, first of all, explain to the jury what a meta-analysis is.
So a meta-analysis is a way of taking different epidemiology studies and trying to combine those results together in order to get additional reliability and additional information by using all of the available data together.
My next question, I've handed you Exhibit 20, which is a series of emails between you and others at Monsanto regarding the Shinazi epidemiological paper. I'd like to ask you a few questions about it, okay?
Yes.
All right, sir. So this was, and I hear you're on the email chain regarding this new paper, right, sir?
Yes, I'm at least on this first email that at the top. I guess that would be the more recent of the emails.
It says about the Shinazi paper, the data on glyphosate is also worth looking over. Table 4, page 4505, summarizes 6 studies on glyphosate and non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, 3 or 4 of which report significant increases in the risk ratio. Did I read that correctly?
You did, but there were some serious issues with the quality of work in this paper, and this data was reanalyzed by Delzell, and they found a number of significant statistical errors in their work, and on recalculating it in accordance with their own analysis plan, these relationships were no longer anywhere near as statistically significant.
You know that the Shinazi paper of 2014, this meta-analysis, was one of the pieces of scientific evidence upon which Iarc concluded that glyphosate was a probably associated with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. It was one of the pieces of evidence used. You're aware of that?
It was cited in their document, so they had looked at it. That is correct. I don't think they looked at everything, but they had looked at that.
What is ACSH?
I'm sure it stands for a number of things, but in this context, you're most likely referring to the American Council for Science and Health.
What do you understand they do?
They put out responses for public consumption on various scientific issues related to public health.
And once the Iarc decision came in, you recommended that Monsanto fund money to them so that they would write articles saying Iarc was wrong about glyphosate. That was part of the Iarc strategy, right?
No, you've mischaracterized that. We support and had supported ACSH on and off over the years with various grants. What I believe I proposed that we do at that time was to provide them the scientific literature so that they can create whatever documents and responses they choose to create.
All right, sir. So this is an email from you on February 26, 2015, right, sir?
Correct.
To other employees at Monsanto, right?
To my leadership in the Regulatory and Scientific Affairs group, yes.
Okay. Regarding ACSH, right?
That is correct.
And what does that stand for again?
The American Council on Science and Health, I believe.
And they were working with you to respond to Iarc if Iarc came out with a decision Monsanto didn't like, right?
Well, they were working with us only in the sense that I had raised this issue with Gil Ross, who was at ACSH, and asked him if they would be interested in receiving information regarding Iarc so that they can prepare to respond. So we don't decide whether they respond. If they do respond, we do not generate that content, and they're quite adamant about those parameters. So, my point here really was a plea for funding. I wanted to keep our funding to ACSH. I believe that they do a lot of good work. We don't dictate what they respond to, and we don't dictate what they say.
Let's see what you said in February 2015. What you stated, sir, were, quote, they are working with us to respond if needed to Iarc. True?
That is correct, and it's what I said previously. I had contacted Gil knowing that the Iarc decision was coming and offered to provide him the complete set of information around the glyphosate and cancer issues.
He wanted you to feed him the information, right?
I raised the issue with him and offered to provide the scientific information to ACSH.
And you stated about whether or not the financial reward would be there with ACH for Monsanto, quote, while I would love to have more friends and more choices, we don't have a lot of supporters and can't afford to lose the few we have.
Well, as I stated earlier, this is an argument for continued funding. I was essentially making the case internally at that point in time in our budget cycle that we needed to support ACSH.
You go on to say, quote, I am well aware of the challenges with ACSH and know Eric has valid concerns. So I can assure you I'm not all starry-eyed about ACSH. They have plenty of warts. What are some of their warts?
Well, if you look back at them historically, some of their positions on tobacco, some of their positions on lead are not positions that I would agree with. So, this is an organization that I think, at least in the recent past, has done good quality science-based work, and I felt it was useful for us to continue to support them.
Let's go a couple pages back, if we could, sir, to page 9478. This is an email from you to Tracy about the glyphosate Iarc assessment, right, sir?
Yes.
This was about 8 hours before the one we just read, right?
Yes.
Okay. Per my discussion with John, we had some money set aside for Iarc. What's that mean?
I had a budget line in the proposed budget to continue to support ACSH in relation to Iarc.
Right. So you thought that you should go ahead and make that contribution to ACSH, right?
That is correct.
Yeah. These are the same people that helped defend the tobacco companies and the same people that helped defend the lead companies, right?
They had taken positions in the past on some of those issues that I do not fully agree with. That is correct.
Yes, sir. And let's go to the next page, page 9479. This, I believe, is a response from ACH to your to you. I want to back up, make sure I get it accurate. It's an email from Gilbert Ross at ACH, right?
Yes.
And to you, right, sir?
That is correct.
Regarding the glyphosate and the Iarc assessment, right?
Yes.
Okay. This situation, however, further illustrates why Monsanto's ongoing support of ACSH is critical, both for Monsanto and ACSH. Did I read that correctly?
You did, but you've taken it out of the context with the remainder of the paragraph where he talks about providing information that will help them get further up to speed on this topic. So again, this reflects my providing them with information that they would need to do a scientific assessment on a complex issue.
And in fact, you were able to persuade your bosses to provide that ongoing support to ACSH, and they in fact did write scientific pieces about the Iarc decision of glyphosate, right?
That is correct, yes.
One of your key jobs at Monsanto was to neutralize the impact of the Iarc decision, right, Dr. Goldstein?
I don't think that's a fair characterization of what I do.
Let's look at the documents. We've marked this as Exhibit 23. Copy of you, sir, and a copy of counsel. All right, you ready, sir?
Just give me one more moment just to look through the center portion of the document.
Yes, sir.
Go ahead.
All right, thank you, sir. Okay, now we're looking now at an email sent from Kelly Kloss, and a Monsanto employee, right?
Yes.
In February of 2015, right?
Yes.
Where she copies many Monsanto employees, including you, right?
The number of people on here, I am included, yes.
Mm-hmm. Including Donna Farmer as well, I see, right?
Correct.
Okay, the importance of this is high, right?
Yes.
And it's regarding Iarc outreach, and attached is an Iarc plan, right?
That is correct.
And that plan that's attached incorporates feedback from 3 people, including you, Dan Goldstein, right?
Yes.
Okay. Let's take a look at the plan. One thing you say in your plan is that Iarc is a World Health Organization. That's what it's part of, right?
Yes, but let's be clear on who is saying this. So I did not write this plan. So you said you. I did not write this plan. I commented on it.
Right. You read it over and incorporated feedback into the plan, right?
Well, someone else incorporated the feedback, but I did at some point comment on this, yes.
And going to base stamp page 63854, in this plan it shows that Iarc, International Agency for Research on Cancer, is a World Health Organization. It's part of it, right?
It is part of the WHO, yes.
It says here the International Agency for Research on Cancer, Iarc, is a specialized cancer agency of the World Health Organization, right? In this draft plan, it says we should assume and prepare for the outcome of 2B rating, possible human carcinogen, semicolon, a 2A rating, probable human carcinogen, is possible but less likely. Did I read that correctly?
Yes, you did.
And in fact, what you got 2 weeks later was a probable human carcinogen rating, right?
That is correct.
Attachment A, which is, so we know what this is on that same exhibit. Attachment A, preparedness and engagement plan for Iarc, carcinogen rating of glyphosate. Post Iarc, Monsanto is going to orchestrate an outcry with the Iarc decision, right?
That is what the document says. I can't speak to any of the specifics. This is a planning document from Public Affairs, and although I commented on it, I don't know specifically what they mean by this.
Let's look at Exhibit 24. Exhibit 24, an email chain produced by Monsanto. All right, sir.
Go ahead.
In this email, which was sent to you by John Avancini, who is he?
At that time, he was my boss.
Okay. And this is about a week or 2 after the Iarc decision, right? March 25th, 2015. And it says ESH, that's environmental, what's the name of it again?
Environmental Safety and Health.
Medical conference outcome. I spoke with Annie Mikey. Am I pronouncing that?
Anamika.
Anamika. And who is Anamika?
Anamika de Wilde is the head of occupational medicine.
And where is she located?
In St. Louis.
What's her last name?
De Wilde. D-E, capital W-I-L-D-E.
And says she is in alignment that we should not concede a cancer hazard. Some of the ESH folks seem to be inclined to go with a message that Iarc has identified a hazard, but dose is low in the plants and thus no significant risk was present. John writes on, I have emphasized the need to hold firm on the, quote, no cancer hazard, end quote, position as per the new press release. First off, did I read that correctly?
Yes, but I believe that that is correspondence from me, not from John Vicini. There's another header in there. It's not as obvious as the first one.
I'm sorry, you're absolutely right. I appreciate your clarification. All right, so that was from you. And let me ask you about that paragraph. Who are the ESH folks that wanted to go with a message that Iarc has identified a hazard?
I don't remember the specific individuals at the time. We had considerable conversation about the need to communicate with our employees, and communication to employees would fall within the scope of our environmental safety and health group. So this is something that I would work in collaboration with them on. And there were 2 different approaches, and remember that many of these approaches are coming from industrial hygiene people who don't understand or know of the underlying data. So there was a debate as to whether we should acknowledge that Roundup may cause cancer, but that a dose response assessment, a risk assessment, was not done by Iarc and our doses were low, or we should remain with what I believe is the correct assessment, which is glyphosate is unlikely to cause cancer, that the Iarc classification is incorrect, and that independent of exposure levels, which by the way are very low anyway, that there is no risk of cancer to our employees.
I want to share what we've marked as Exhibit 25, a series of emails concerning carcinogens in April 2016. Review it, and I have a question or 2.
Yes, go ahead.
Yes, sir. This is an email from you in April 2016. Is that right, sir?
Yes.
All right. Who is Aaron Castillo?
She is in regulatory affairs, and she's involved in chemical regulation.
And so this is a little over a year after the Iarc ruling or decision, and she writes you at the bottom of the page. It says, Dan, St. Louis ESH is rewriting our chemical safety audit procedure, which includes reviewing carcinogens. My first question to you is, what is a chemical safety audit procedure?
So this would be an audit on new incoming chemicals for our facilities. They're not necessarily products, they could be chemicals for research, for instance. But when someone submits a request to bring a new chemical on site, whatever they're doing with it, there is a process that is site-specific for evaluating that new chemical.
And that would be conducted by the ESH team?
In general, yes, and they can ask for assistance if they need it from other experts within the company, but generally they're able to conduct that themselves.
You write back to her and you state in pertinent part, I am not sure we can necessarily take this position given OSHA right-to-know regulations that require that we list Iarc carcinogenicity on data sheets. Did I read that correctly?
That is correct. That is written into the regulations in in reference to production of material safety data sheets. So she's asking basically for our audit procedure, should we limit that to other sources of information? And what I'm saying here is, given the current federal law requiring that we list Iarc on a material safety data sheet, I don't believe it is advisable to do that. We need to be aware of that. We need to consider it appropriately. And and prior to this, we had updated our material safety data sheets to note the Iarc classification, but also noting that we did not believe that classification was justified.
But I want to finish reading that paragraph, which I think speaks to that point. Quote, we are altering our current glyphosate SDS safety data sheet, right?
Yes.
If I understand correctly, to state that Iarc classifies glyphosate as a 2A probable human carcinogen, but that we do not concur with this assessment, right?
Correct. That's exactly what I was saying. In fact, I believe as of this timing that had already occurred. I can't say it happened simultaneously on every SDS. We have a lot of them that need to be updated.
Good afternoon, Dr. Goldstein. As you know, my name is Martin Calhoun, and I represent Monsanto Company in this case. Are you employed at Monsanto?
Yes, I am.
And what is your current job title at Monsanto?
I am a Distinguished Science Fellow and lead for Medical Sciences and Outreach.
And what year did you start your employment at Monsanto?
1998.
And I just want to go briefly over your background. Where and when were you born, Dr. Goldstein?
I was born outside Chicago. I was born in Aurora, Illinois, 1955.
And where did you go to college for your undergraduate education?
Undergraduate, University of Wisconsin at Madison.
And did you graduate from University of Wisconsin?
I did, yeah, major in molecular biology in December of '76.
Did you then go to medical school?
I did.
Where did you go to medical school?
Johns Hopkins Medical School in Baltimore.
And did you graduate from medical school?
I did.
And when was that?
It would have been 1981.
And after graduating from medical school, did you do a medical residency?
I did. I did a pediatrics residency also at Johns Hopkins.
And after that residency, did you pursue studies in toxicology and pharmacology?
I did. I did a fellowship at University of Toronto at the Hospital for Sick Children in Toronto, Canada.
And was that in both toxicology and pharmacology?
Yes, it was two separate certifications, but I did both.
And did you eventually become a board-certified medical toxicologist?
Yes, I did.
And can you just tell us in simple terms, Dr. Goldstein, what is a medical toxicologist?
So a medical toxicologist specializes in the diagnosis and treatment of poisoning in humans. So it's unlike the PhD toxicologists who are oftentimes doing rodent studies and risk assessments. The focus of clinical toxicology or medical toxicology is assessment and treatment of patients.
And after you finished your education, did you work as a medical toxicologist treating patients?
I did, yes. I was in Denver for about 12 years doing a mixture of critical care toxicology in the intensive care unit, outpatient toxicology at the hospital, as well as an office practice in occupational and environmental medicine.
And have you held various titles and had various responsibilities while working at Monsanto for approximately 20 years?
I've had various titles over the years and had responsibility in a wide variety of different product areas.
Now, Dr. Goldstein, do you consider yourself a scientist?
I do, yes.
And have you worked with other scientists at Monsanto during the 20 years approximately that you've been at Monsanto?
Yes, quite regularly.
And over the years, have other departments and employees at Monsanto looked to you for advice and insights about various toxicology issues?
Yes.
And is that how it works at Monsanto, that there's cooperation and collaboration among employees and departments?
We're a very open company, so we tend to address issues by networking with individuals that may have knowledge or resources that are useful.
And in your experience, what has been the role of science at Monsanto over the years?
It's fundamentally a science-driven company. Product development is almost entirely driven by science, especially new science. Product safety assessment, of course, is also very much a scientific process.
And Dr. Goldstein, in the deposition today, we've heard a lot of questions and answers about glyphosate and glyphosate-based herbicides. Have you worked on various glyphosate issues, including human health and safety, throughout the approximately 20 years that you've been at Monsanto?
Yes, I have.
As part of your responsibilities working at Monsanto, have you become generally familiar with how Monsanto developed and evaluated the safety of glyphosate-based herbicides?
Yes, I have.
And about how long have various kinds of Monsanto glyphosate-based herbicides been available in this country?
They were first marketed in the U.S., and I believe it was 1974.
And please tell the jury in simple terms what is typically in most of Monsanto's glyphosate-based herbicides.
They're pretty simple formulations. They have glyphosate, they have water, and they have a surfactant, a detergent in them as well. And then there's very small concentrations of some minor formulating ingredients in some products. Some of them have a little bit of food coloring to add a color to the product, and products in them that keep them from foaming up when you add water.
And what is a surfactant in simple terms, Dr. Goldstein?
So a surfactant is really just a soap or detergent. It's a type of a molecule that allows fat and water to sort of come together, and humans use them mostly in the household environment for cleaning things, for removing greases and oils, or for cleaning your hands.
And why would a surfactant be in a glyphosate-based herbicide?
So surfactants in herbicides mostly are used to help deliver the herbicide into the plant, because plants have a waxy cuticle, a coating. So if you try and apply something, it just sort of beads up on the surface. So we add a surfactant that then allows the herbicide to be effective at a much, much lower concentration.
So in essence, does the surfactant make the herbicide work better?
It does, yes.
And are surfactants used for products other than Monsanto herbicides?
Yes.
Can you give us a couple of examples, please?
So they're generally present in herbicides from Monsanto or other sources. But they're common in liquid soaps, shampoos, conditioners, laundry detergents, dishwashing detergents. So they're an exposure that human beings regularly have in the context of their daily life.
Is there a federal government agency that evaluates the safety of herbicides and decides whether herbicides can be sold in the United States?
Yes, that would be the Environmental Protection Agency, or EPA.
And during your employment at Monsanto, have you become generally familiar with the EPA's regulatory review and evaluation of glyphosate and glyphosate-based herbicides?
Yes, I have.
And from 1974 to the present day, has Monsanto had EPA approval to sell glyphosate-based herbicides in the United States?
Yes.
Over the years, has the EPA considered a large volume of data and scientific studies to evaluate the safety of glyphosate and glyphosate-based herbicides?
Yes, they have.
Let me rephrase the question. Can you characterize for us the volume of data and scientific studies that EPA has considered or has not considered with respect to evaluating the safety of glyphosate and glyphosate-based herbicides?
So EPA has at its disposal not only data from Monsanto, but data from other manufacturers. They get an extensive variety of information regarding safety, including animal studies of both short-term and long-term toxicity. So they also then follow on an ongoing basis the medical literature, so they're aware of the epidemiology studies and other human information related to glyphosate products.
Now, you've testified earlier today about the Iarc monograph regarding glyphosate. Do you recall some of those questions?
Yes.
Let's discuss that a little bit, including Iarc's assessment that glyphosate is a probable carcinogen. Do you recall evaluating that Iarc monograph?
I do.
And what is your evaluation of Iarc's glyphosate assessment regarding whether it is based on sound science?
It's a poor quality assessment. It's based on a limited review of the science relative to regulatory agencies, and I don't believe that the science supports their conclusions. And it's not just me. The same conclusion has been reached by regulatory agencies around the world.
In your assessment, is Iarc's glyphosate assessment sound science, Dr. Goldstein?
No.
Could you give us a few examples of why you think Iarc's assessment of glyphosate is flawed?
They looked at only a subset of the available information. They cherry-picked the data that they wanted to focus on rather than looking at the broader weight of the evidence. They completely failed to take into account any consideration of exposure. And so I think overall, just a poorly done and incomplete assessment relative to the regulatory agencies.
And when you're referring to exposure, are you referring to real-world exposures to glyphosate?
Yes, they did not take into account real-world exposure data.
So from a scientific perspective, do you and Monsanto agree with Iarc's conclusions about glyphosate?
No, we do not.
All right, let me hand you what I'm marking as Exhibit 27. Copy for you, Counsel. Now, Dr. Goldstein, I've marked what is Exhibit 27, a study called, quote, Glyphosate Use and Cancer Incidence in the Agricultural Health Study, end quote. Did I read that correctly?
You did, yes.
And have you seen this study before?
I have.
Is this a study that you referred to shortly in prior testimony, that you referred to it as the Agricultural Health Study?
Yes, it is.
All right. And if you go to the top right-hand corner of Exhibit 27, do you see it states there when this study was first published?
Yes.
And what does that say?
It was first published online November 9th, 2017, and then went to press in 2018.
And who is the first author on this study?
That is the Andreotti publication.
All right, so the first author is Gabriela Andreotti, is that right?
That's correct.
And do you see on the first page it says affiliations of authors?
Yes.
Are any of the authors that were involved in this study, do any of them work at Monsanto?
No.
Are these authors all at various government agencies?
They're either at government agencies or they're in academic institutions. There's actually a mixture here. Some of them have left the program and gone to academic institutions but continue to work with the Ag Health study.
To your knowledge, did Monsanto have anything to do with this study that's been marked as Exhibit 17 in terms of funding or other support for the study?
No.
Now, if you go to the conclusions in the abstract, I'd like to read that into the record, and then I'll ask you some questions about it. Conclusions, quote, in this large prospective cohort study, no association was apparent between glyphosate and any solid tumors or lymphoid malignancies overall, including NHL and its subtypes, end quote. Did I read that correctly?
You did.
And what does NHL stand for in that sentence?
Non-Hodgkin's lymphoma.
So what does this tell you, Dr. Goldstein, about the issue of whether glyphosate or glyphosate-based herbicides cause non-Hodgkin's lymphoma?
This is very important information because it's human information. It relates to formulated products and comes from the largest and most comprehensive prospective study that has ever been done in farmers and applicators and their spouses. They found no relationship between glyphosate exposure and non-Hodgkin's lymphoma in this publication.
Now, you were shown various abstracts and studies earlier in this deposition by plaintiff's counsel. Do you recall those series of questions generally, Dr. Goldstein?
Yes.
Now, were any of those studies sound science regarding the issue of whether glyphosate or glyphosate-based herbicides cause cancer?
Taken collectively, no, they're not.
And how about individually, were any of them sound science in your view and Monsanto's view on the issue of whether glyphosate or glyphosate-based herbicides cause cancer?
No.
Now, has the EPA been aware of the various studies that plaintiff's counsel showed you earlier today in this deposition?
Yes, definitely.
And did any of those studies change the EPA's conclusion that glyphosate is not likely to be carcinogenic to humans?
I mean, evidently not. I mean, the most recent information we have suggests that they're standing firmly behind that conclusion.